Welcome to Flashpoints. I'm Margaret Brennan here in the CBS newsroom, and I'm joined by Juan Zarate, Senior National Security Analyst here at CBS. There is a lot to talk about this week.
Too much almost.
Too much almost. But a significant handing over in Afghanistan. British and U.S. forces transferring basically a number of very key bases in a very important part of Afghanistan over to Afghan control.
Yeah, this is part of the broader transition and drawdown of U.S. combat troops and certainly NATO troops as well. Two bases in Helmand province handed over to the Afghans. Camp Leatherneck, which had gained some fame, very important bases in the Helmand province, bases from which the Marines fought some very tough and hard battles against Taliban forces. This is important, Margaret, because it's a demonstration of the drawdown that the administration has called for and that NATO is engaged in, but also an attempt to hand over to the Afghans themselves security for Helmand province. And really kind of a question of faith as to whether or not the Afghans are going to be able to defend both Helmand, these bases, and in general Afghan security. Lots of hope that the training has gone well, that they're able to do it, but this handover is really that test and in the beginnings of the long-term drawdown as we march toward 2016.
And it'll be interesting to see whether the Iraq model and the Afghanistan model go two different routes here, whether those domestic security forces can hold and defend territory. One thing that's so important about that region is that's the heart of the poppy trade.
Yeah.
And economically, Afghanistan's got a lot of problems. Their president now in office, his very first trip abroad was to neighboring China to talk about trade.
Yeah, President Ghani took his first trip to Beijing. Not insignificant. He understands that China's a neighbor, a growing world power, soon to be the largest economy in the world, if not already, depending on the numbers and the data that you look at. And China's already invested in Afghanistan, the mining sector in particular, and that's going to be important for Afghan economy moving forward. So President Ghani is not shy, and he understands where the future lies, and it lies not just in relations with the U.S. and the West, that's clear, he's been very supportive of that, but it also lies with China and other neighbors, and so that's why he took the trip to Beijing.
It's going to be interesting to see what the U.S.-Afghan relationship will be under his leadership. Even with this handover, there are still going to be a number of U.S. troops on the ground in Afghanistan and a lot at stake here. There are questions now about what power, what role the U.S. will still have legally in Afghanistan going forward, particularly when it comes to some of the detainees who are still of security concern to the U.S.
Right. This has been Afghanistan has been a theater of battle for the United States. The laws of war have applied with detainees, with engagement, with how the U.S. has operated, especially with its military forces. You saw just a few days ago the administration transferring one of these detainees from Afghanistan after being held for 5 years, a dangerous terrorist who was captured on the battlefield, transferring them back to the United States to face criminal trial, which is a very interesting and important moment, in part because you have the same questions that have bedeviled not just this administration but the prior administration around trials for Guantanamo detainees also applies to a handful of detainees who've been held in Afghanistan largely for intelligence and protective purposes. And so this is the beginnings of an attempt to deal with the handful of those individuals who still remain in custody and who are still deemed to be dangerous.
It's a test case for whether these accused terrorists can be tried in our court system here, but it's also raises those questions legally. Does the U.S. have the right to continue to hold on to them if we're no longer at war?
That's right, and there's a legal debate going on, especially after 2016. If we're not going to have combat troops, if we're not going to be in a war-fighting posture, what is the authority to hold people, to capture them, to hold them for intelligence purposes? These are really interesting questions that move well beyond this administration in 2016 to the question of what happens in Afghanistan. What happens if it becomes a failed state or a safe haven, or parts of it become places for Al-Qaeda or like-minded terrorists to operate? That's really an important question, even beyond 2016.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. Juan, thank you very much. This has been Flashpoints, taking a look at Afghanistan. Much more ahead. Check us out on cbsnews.com.